All right, we are live. Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with co-host Joshua Morgan, content marketer extraordinaire, and of course, David Finkelstein, BDEX's co-founder and CEO. So today's guest is David Whitting. David is a leader in corporate communications, analytics-driven marketing, and business transformation, helping some of the largest, most innovative companies in the world develop award-winning integrated global communication programs built on a combination of public relations, advertising, marketing, data, and demand generation. He uniquely understands what it takes for businesses to successfully scale their capabilities across the full range of communications, marketing, and technology that are required for B2B companies to succeed. So thank you so much for being here, David. Could you please just start from the beginning and tell us about yourself and your story, and also a little bit about Edelman?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you everybody for having me. And Jessie, it's Whiting, not Whitting.
I apologize. I meant to ask that prior.
No worries. Well, I've seen the podcast also where you guys have a lot of fun on the Whiskey Wednesday. So I'm coming on Thursday. So kind of blew that one. But thanks so much for having me. So Edelman's the world's largest communications firm, working with, as you said, a number of large global clients, but also with a number of startups, really helping clients communicate their value, communicate their mission, and really engage stakeholders to help them act and build trust. And so my role is to help to drive the firm's adoption of CommsTech and help our clients modernize their corporate communications functions. And so really what that means is we're designing data-led communication programs which drive action and build trust amongst those key external but also internal stakeholders. And then just as a little bit of background, kind of who I am and where I came from, is that I really started my career in politics, which really helped me understand how decisions are made. So whether that was like general populations around elections, engaging elected leaders around congressional votes, procurement teams around government contracting, that kind of list goes on. And when I made the transition into corporate communication advising, those skills really translated really well because I knew how stakeholders made decisions. And so now we're at a point where we have a lot of tools, a lot of technology, and of course, a lot of data that help us engage those stakeholders at that individual level. And so that allows us to really measure our impact of our communication programs in a much more attributable way than even 2 years ago. So it's really an exciting time, and I'm really happy to be here for the conversation.
That's great, Dave. So it's great to meet you. Obviously, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you here. You obviously have an interesting background, and since this is the Deconstructing Data podcast, I thought it'd be interesting for us to explore how the best communicators are leveraging data. So in your opinion, what are some of the things that best communicators are doing to leverage data and you're seeing in your industry and that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so look, it's really an exciting time within the communications industry, and specifically because so many communicators are executing these data-led programs. And I think really first, it's about understanding your audiences in a way that we in the communications space haven't really been able to do before. And again, from that corporate perspective. And an example of that would be, we work with a global financial institution who's seeking to engage a certain audience to drive awareness and demand. And their sales team has said that their target customer only wants to hear about XYZ. And what we're really doing is we're utilizing intent data. And I know you guys have a point of view on intent data. We're using survey data, qualitative interviews, all of this to gain that better understanding of what those target audiences actually care about. And so it's really fun to be able to have these conversations with our corporate communication teams and our clients to be able to say, okay, your sales team's really focusing on this. But what we've really found through this data and through this analysis is that they're actually focusing on something totally different. And so what we're doing is we're helping build connections between sales and communications, but also between communications and marketing. And so those are, really kind of one of the ways that we're really helping to drive the use of data within the communication space. And it's pretty interesting and it's a fun time.
I love the fact that you opened that up with the importance of understanding your audience, because that's something we talk to our customers about all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, being able to really understand what those individuals care about, I mean, that's the crux of it. And if you're not able to do that, then you're executing these campaigns that are going to, generate metrics that are, maybe not actually driving business value. And so that's really what we're focusing on, is using data in a way to actually drive business value. And, from the marketing side of things, that's always been the conversation, right? It's like, I give you $1 and I'll give you $1.50 back. But now from the PR and communication side of things, the fact that we're able to do that in a way that says, hey, we're able to get investors to think about you differently, and we can actually drive measurable impact on that. Thinking about, yes, from a sales perspective, but also thinking about from a GR perspective, or within that kind of B2B world or in B2G world. So it's certainly exciting times for sure. And the audience is the core and the key part of it, to understand them deeply beyond just, the typical personas or the typical, audience charts or sheets that you end up pulling together. It's what do they really care about?
It's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was, interested to hear that you started in politics, because I have a similar story and made a transition. So actually the first role was a communications role, press intern for Senator
Nice.
Durbin. So is that sort of what you were doing? Were you doing press in politics?
Yeah, so I started with so I'm originally from Boston, and so I started with an internship in the Massachusetts State House, working for a local rep. It was just more broad kind of constituent engagement, right? So like, I was really on the forefront of fielding the calls and saying, hey, what is so-and-so, or where's my cost of living increase? I need the member to be voting on these types of things. And so really kind of taking that kind of first line of defense to understand what the constituents' issues are, and then how do we then translate that into, okay, what's the sort of action that we can take to actually help some of these issues? And then from there, kind of transitioning into working for the DNC at the convention in 2004, where then I was working also on then Senator Kerry's presidential campaign, and then made the transition into kind of lobbying and public affairs, from there. So it's an exciting world. And I always like tell young people who call and try to, get advice, or, whether it's from, where I went to college or other friends, like, jump on a political campaign. It's going to be one of the most interesting, high pressure, but also fruitful experiences you'll ever get, because you'll learn how to tell a story, you'll learn how decisions are made, and you'll do it all in a world where you're going to be building relationships with people, because you're in the trenches and like the pressure is so big. And the best part is that at the end, you either win or you lose. So you work towards something, right? So it's a great experience. I can't recommend it enough.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. So kind of transitioning back, but kind of similarly related, how can data and, editorial instinct come together for marketing and communications organizations?
Yeah. So, I think from a communications perspective, from a marketing point of view, we really need to have that knack for storytelling. Because, again, to me, that's really the key to a successful campaign. And I view data, tools, tech, those are all the enablers. But if you don't have a good story to tell that's relevant to your audience's specific barriers or needs, the audience isn't going to pay attention. So David, like you said, it's like, we start with the audience. If you don't understand what the barrier is for your audience, they're not going to react. They're not going to engage. It's going to be a very one-way conversation at best, or it's going to be a deleted email, or it's, zero engagement on any sort of social channels. And that pipeline is going to remain pretty weak.
So Dave, I love storytelling, and as I'm doing a leadership course through WildSpark, because they're all about building leaders, one of their core tenets they start off with, to be a good leader, is you need to be a good storyteller, because once you can tell that story, you can build those connections with like other people. So, and those connections are so important. And so how do you feel like, how does it feed into storytelling? And can you think of like some examples where you see people that are bringing data into storytelling?
Yeah, for sure. So I can give you an example recently where we're working with a global industrials company, and they're a major supplier to the EV space. And their challenge was that their investor relations team, right? They felt that their investment thesis, which is that the EV adoption world is increasing, right? And therefore their business will scale to that demand. The investment community did not understand and there was no real awareness of what value they actually were bringing to that space. And so the client reached out and said, we really need to be driving more awareness around what we're doing within the EV space. Can you reach the investment community? And they came to us thinking, okay, well, you're a public relations firm, communications. That means you're probably going to be, pitching Investor Business Daily, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, to really, drive awareness, within some of these publications. And what we said was actually, it's not really where we need to be going right now. Yes, we can do some of that, but what's more important is let's just go direct to those stakeholders with what our story is. And again, using those audience identification tools, really understanding what those stakeholders actually cared about, what those analysts cared about, what those institutional investment houses actually cared about beyond just what we knew the IR team wanted to push out there. And so we also executed some targeted social listening tools, again, some of the intent data. And what we did was we created editorial content that we knew would resonate. And we targeted these stakeholders via, every sort of channel you can imagine, email content campaign, LinkedIn lead gen, et cetera, et cetera. And what we were able to do is, come back with a much more measurable program where we're able to share, how much of our content was being consumed, and importantly, by whom. And then the kind of output of that was, yes, here's like some great, metrics as to the campaign, but most importantly is that we were able to help that storytelling where we went direct to those analysts actually come through in those analyst reports. And so it's really a successful example is using data to inform our storytelling with meaningful outcomes that, really hits beyond just look at our metrics, our dashboard, this is really great. But now we're having, executive level conversations to say, here's how we're helping tell your investment thesis to those specific individuals that matter. And as a result, those individuals that matter, they're now helping tell that investment thesis, more broadly through their analyst reports. So, one example of how data is really informing our storytelling. And again, it's through a very targeted and meaningful way that focuses on business outcomes rather than just let's create media clips, let's push out marketing materials, let's try to have these kind of conversations where we hope people will absorb the information that we're pushing out. We're using data to say, this is what these individuals care about. So let's make sure we wrap our stories around that.
That's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah,
and so I'm not as familiar with, CommsTech as I am with MarTech or AdTech. So how is the communications function catching up to marketing teams as it relates to data and analytics?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. First iteration of ad tech, right? Very much channel focused, understanding, where you're going to be placing those ads. I think MarTech is the other evolution of that, where now what we have for CommsTech is really the ability to understand our stakeholders and go really directly to those stakeholders. And it is using and borrowing a lot of the MarTech capabilities. But really what we focus on is, again, using those tools and technologies to be able to go direct to those individuals in that example I just shared. And so communications, the corporate reputation world, really what we have now is the opportunity to, yes, go direct, but also to understand what sort of trends are emerging. So as you think about, protecting your brand, as you think about ensuring that individuals understand what your brand mission, vision, values really are, so that helps with recruitment, that helps with retention, and certainly that helps with new customers and filling that pipeline. Really allows us to create a more measurable program that, again, gets to that individual stakeholder and help shape those points of view and communicate directly to them.
So would you be willing to share anything about what's in your CommsTech stack and what you might suggest?
Yeah, so so Edelman, I will say that our point of view on CommsTech, which is different from other firms, is that we aren't creating a singular solution, right? And it's not just branded Edelman and here you go, because that's not really CommsTech, and that's not really utilizing all of the tools and technologies that are out there to gather the right data. And so really what our approach is to ensure that we are using all of those different types of tools. So if you think about, audience identification, right? For us, there's, certainly the survey-based elements, and that's part of our data and insights team, where we have those capabilities. You think about the editorial side of things, it's using tools like intent data to inform, okay, what are the types of pieces of content that individuals are actually consuming of whom you're trying to target. So, what we have is a huge, we made I have a slide that is essentially the Lumascape of all of the different capabilities and tools that are within the Edelman tech stack. But what I would say is that, we're an independent firm. And what's great about that is we're not beholden to any sort of specific tools and technologies. So we can really use a lot of different tools that are fit for purpose for whatever our clients are really trying to drive attention for.
I love it because the individuality of it, complete personalization for what a person needs. So speaking of that, where do you think that mistakes are happening with businesses when it comes to, integrated communications?
So it's a good question, because as CommsTech is evolving, as more and more communicators are starting to say, okay, well, when you think about integrated communication campaigns, the kind of first step is, well, that means social media or digital, right? But really, what others are also focusing on is media relations, because that's what they're responsible for. So I think the biggest mistake that we're seeing, and we're really helping our clients work through, is not evolving the corporate communications KPIs beyond media clips or beyond share of voice or beyond, even, some folks are still using ad equivalency, right? And so we now have the capability to say, like, look, we can actually put meaningful statistics around this, or meaningful data points or metrics that are going to help you show what your value is beyond these, traditional measures of success. And so really what we want to do, the biggest mistake is not using a proper and full integrated campaign model. So using all of the right channels means going beyond just media relations, means going beyond just organic social. So it's helping ultimately move your corporate communications function from this perceived cost center to really a value center, and that we now have the tools and capabilities to do that.
Yeah, that's great. So we've talked a lot about audiences and knowing your audience. And so can you talk a little bit to our listeners about the importance of first-party data when it comes to, with respect to communications and your experience there?
Yeah, look, first-party data is critical. And, as you think about the universe of whom you want to communicate to, of whom you want to absorb and understand who you are as a company, what your values are, what your mission is, what your business objectives are, you really need to have the understanding of whom you're communicating to. And so for us, it's really getting a strong understanding of what that first-party data is. I will also say that as more and more communicators and companies enter this space of saying, how do we actually target? How do we actually engage the individuals of whom we're trying to move? There is a learning process of actually helping teams understand where that first party data actually exists and who they need to work with. So there is that kind of evolution and education that needs to happen. And it's happening now. And, for us, it's helping them identify kind of where that exists, but also what the value of that is. And so for us, really what we focus on is, we're having a lot of conversations with the marketing team. We're having a lot of conversations with the sales team, and really kind of bridging those gaps of understanding what data they actually have available to them today. So again, it's critical for us. And then what we really try to do is also help them understand what actual first party data they have so that we can then begin that really meaningful targeting program.
Jesse, you're on mute.
Oh, no, you're on mute, Jesse.
Sorry, I was trying to block my notifications, but I was just saying that's so important, first party data. See
Yep.
that notification. I wanted to ask you, so what do you think is the future of data in communications?
Yeah, so I think that, I feel like, what I've been talking about thus far is that we're the communications world, specifically in corporate reputation, people are really starting to dip their toe into what data can do for their programs, for their companies. But I really think the future is going to be data driven within the communication space. I have a colleague who wears a t-shirt that says, data made me do it. And I'm working, to ensure also that our clients, but also consultants alike, ask the questions that said, what does the data tell us, so that we can build a program that's not solely informed by the data, right? But it needs to be inclusive of the data. And we know that through our own Edelman Future of Corporate Communications study that I think it's nearly 70% of all chief communication officers are investing in data-driven CommsTech programs. So, it's a huge number. And it also says that the majority of people haven't done it yet, that they're just now starting to get into, okay, what can data do for us? What does the data tell us? How do I use data? And the other thing that we're starting to see now is really sophisticated companies now are starting to hire data scientists, and it's to analyze competitor information. And that's not just for the business development or the sales team, but it's also for the communications team to say, okay, how can we differentiate our messaging against our competitors, and where is that kind of white space where we can actually tell a story, again, that goes beyond just simply products, or goes beyond just simply a point of view of a sales team, but more inclusive of what the company values are. Because the other thing we know is that companies that are more trusted perform better. And in order to build that trust, you need to drive action. And what I mean by that is you need to drive action amongst those key stakeholders of whom you're trying to move, who you're trying to buy something, vote some way, or invest in something. There needs to be something for them to do. And that's really what I think the future is. And more corporate communication teams are going to be doing that.
Absolutely. So what makes you most excited about it, or the most paranoid about this future of communications with data? Are we too driven by data?
Look, this is where I can kind of take a step back, because, I'm not necessarily in the product marketing world as much as I know you and maybe your clients and the audience maybe, but within the corporate reputation space, I think it's a really exciting time to be able to use data to inform those campaigns. Mm-hmm. Really, the way that we approach it and we talk about it is that this is about efficiency. It's no longer just trying to throw up as much information as you can, or as many, thought leadership white papers, or marketing slick sheets to people who may not be the right audience. And in terms of paranoia, I think that there definitely needs to be, the right checks and balances as it relates to personal, PII and all of that. I used to, within Edelman, I've been in Edelman for 10 years, and I've had many different roles. And I did have one role in leading our data security and privacy sector, where we worked with a number of cybersecurity clients and providers, but also on the privacy side of things as well. So, it's a real issue all joking aside, but I do think that, through our lens of the corporate reputation world, using data to have something that's more targeted and more applicable, I think is a good thing. I also do, my colleagues will tell you this, whenever I get a marketing email that it's just so far off, I oftentimes respond to them and I say, hey, look, I am in no way the decision maker nor in the sphere of influence of this decision. Like, who's helping you with your targeting? Because, I really think that, what sort of data is informing your list? Is it just, are you just buying lists off, random internet requests? So, we can help you with that. So I always kind of like turn it back on them. I mean, I usually have like fun conversations back. And, but yeah, I mean, having the right data will help you have a more informed and targeted approach that will yield better results and less waste.
It's funny that what you just said about that, because our sales team does the same thing. And I recently got a solicitation in the mail. Actually, it was directed to my wife, who is vegan, or she eats vegan. She's not completely vegan, but whatever. She basically eats vegan, and it was from Omaha Stakes. And somehow it was to her. It wasn't to me. And so Amazing. Immediately I went to Warren, one of the members of our team, on our team, who actually, had communication with them in the past. I'm like, here's a great one for you, and showed them it. And I'm like, that's just, where did they get her name on a list? Doesn't make any sense. So perfect example.
Did they get back to you? Did they?
It's a good question. This literally just happened last week. So I'd have to follow up with Warren and ask him. I have no idea. It's funny, but this happens all the time. And Warren is very, he's very forward in any communications that he gets that were poorly targeted. He will respond to them and let them know, hey, we can help you improve on this. This was really bad targeting.
Yeah. And oftentimes, what we say is like, look, you're spending money on this, and that's just waste. And so, what we want to do, for our clients is to build programs that are fit for purpose, that are data driven, that are targeting the right audience, so that you're not wasting media dollars. So you're not wasting time with it, with a firm. You're not, spending too much time on content development and sending it to the wrong people. I mean, I think that's like really, in our view, where data really plays a huge role in informing whom we're targeting.
Absolutely. So Omaha Stakes, if you're listening.
Well, that's a little bit, I don't know if that's better or worse than the skiing company that just sends mailers out to like everybody in like the neighborhood. So there's like, they're not even trying to target. They're just doing like the spray and pray. But it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. And then, David was talking about with the beef company. And I kind of made a post about this the other day where like 2 to 3 times a day, somebody's like jumping into messaging me going, hey, by the way, I see that you are, and by the way, I'm not in sales at all, but they'll start with, I see that you are working on doing demos too. And I'm like, right. So, try our new targeting marketing outreach to where, and I'm like, so I always respond with, hey, I would advise you next time, just take 30 seconds to look over my profile.
Yeah.
I am not your target market at all. So
definitely.
I just,
the LinkedIn DMs can be pretty.
Yeah, well, and I have to think, if they're doing it to me, which like even on my headline, it's not even related to sales at all. But if they're doing it to me, they have to be like probably doing that to a lot of other people. So how much time is just actually like wasted time is spent that they could have spent just a little bit of time, like, looking at that data, looking at the information to actually go to the correct people that, it needs to go to.
Totally. Josh, where are you based? I'm curious because of the skiing. Are you based in like Aspen or something, a big ski?
No, I'm in Oklahoma City.
Oh, that's a mess.
Yeah, and and the funny thing is it's not even water skiing, it's snow skiing. And so like we have a couple hills here, but we definitely don't have anything like worth snow skiing off of. That's for sure. I could understand better if it was like water skiing, because Oklahoma does have some of the like largest amount of man-made lakes, so there's plenty of areas to go water skiing. But no, snow skiing, it's not going to happen.
Amazing.
So I have a quick question. This is kind of like one of my favorite ones, which is that, piece of advice. But if you could go all the way back to when you first started with everything you know now, what is like one piece of advice that you would give like yourself?
Yeah, it's funny that's not investment related about Bitcoin or something getting in early.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be. I wish somebody, when I was getting student loans, I wish somebody would have said, "Hey, take $1,000 of this, invest it in Netflix when it first came out."
Right. I think the piece of advice that I would give myself is don't be afraid of taking a job that is a stretch. It's not a bad thing to feel a bit uncomfortable in an early job. I mean, stretch yourself, you'll be better for it. And I think also knowing, what you don't like is just as important as knowing what you do like. So, be willing to take risks in that employment. Don't, if you're, for me, I mean, look, I was a liberal arts major where I had some internships in politics, and that was kind of directionally where I wanted to go. But, a year or so after the political campaign work, I joined a really small lobbying and public affairs firm. And, it was really myself, the principal, and somebody else. And so I was mid-20s going with the principal to some serious meetings with serious people and serious leaders. And, I certainly I felt uncomfortable at first, but I think that what that did was, you have to be in sponge mode and really just absorb as much as you can, and don't be afraid to take that job where you may think it's too much of a stretch, because that will only make you a better employee, and it'll only set you up better in for your career, because you'll have confidence and you'll have experience and exposure, and those things are priceless. You can't learn those in school or classes, or it's one of those things that you can only understand by experiencing it. And that's why, Jesse, working on a campaign or working in the political sphere, I mean, it's just such high pressure that, I'm sure you have, a lot of friends who are still like dear friends because you guys were in it and you're like, I can trust this person.
Oh, absolutely. Like some of my bridesmaids, they're like people I worked on campaigns with, because we would like live, sleep, go to school together, like everything. So yeah, it's true. You build the best relationships when you're building something together and it's going somewhere. And when you're all working hard to, make it happen, it's just like magical things can happen. So I have to ask, wait, did you have one more question, Josh?
Well, I was going to ask, like, if somebody could say, hey, I want to go into like one of three, because you've been like in the marketing, you've been in communications, you've been in politics. Of those three, which would you say has been kind of the most, like on a kind of a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, which has been like the most exciting?
So they've all been like, and this isn't, I'm not going to like say all of them, but like they've all been exciting for very different reasons. I think politics, as we've talked about, it's exciting because I have a competitive side to myself, and you're in a campaign, right? So like you either win or you lose.
Yeah.
So like, there's that kind of validation, right? So the political side of things, just like incredible, also having that exposure to those decision-making moments, and also that, no matter what, seniority level you are, like you can influence them. I think from a communications perspective, being close to understand how large companies function and the role that communication plays within those is certainly interesting. For me, working at a firm like Edelman, I always say this to our team. It's like at 9 a.m. you're thinking about a client in Japan who's focused on space launches, and then at 11:30 you've pivoted to an EV sensors maker, and then at 3 o'clock you're pivoting to a cybersecurity provider. So certainly relevant, and all of that being relevant in terms of the narrative or the storytelling of the day of what the news is. And then in marketing, I think it's kind of again going back to that kind of competitive side, where you're actually seeing those results of again, kind of winning, right? Where it's like, okay, like our program is working. We're reaching these people. They're engaging. They're raising their hand. They're buying, or they're converting, or they're doing the thing that, and taking the action that we're trying to do. So, but all that said, I think maybe politics, because that was my first kind of gig, and that's applicable to the other industries.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear sometime about, just how in 2004 you guys were using data, because I got started in 2008 with the Iowa Democratic Party. Well, not get started, but like my first presidential election was 2008 with the Iowa Democratic Party. And I guess it's just campaign wise, because when I was doing press, that was, all government. So the other kind of, hard thing about campaigns are you're just like, it ends in November, right? And then you have to find another job if you're working as a candidate, or you transition into government. So you have to know what you like. And so, it's like you said, it's important to get that experience. But yeah, so I mean, just real quick, what would you say, or would you even know, between 2004 and 2008, what do you think happened with data? And then even to now, in terms of data and campaigns, what stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, in 2004, one of my responsibilities, and it was a really cool one, was that at the convention, I was essentially a handler of a number of celebrities. Because if you remember, I know, I have some really funny stories, and I will absolutely tell you guys them. But if you remember, 2004 was John Kerry, so Ben Affleck was there, and it was like a big Boston moment. And I was bringing somebody around, and we did the very first podcast at the 2004 convention. So I guess it's almost 20 years ago now, but going from there, forward, I mean, it's gone leaps and bounds beyond what anybody can think of. And you think about, fundraising. We were doing a lot of fundraising. We would fax checks, just to prove to the DNC, here's the money that we have coming in, and being able to show what those are. I mean, now the way that data is being used, and think about voter files. I mean, it is absolutely wild to be able to get down to, specifically individuals, right? So you're getting down to neighborhoods, and being able to target those neighborhoods with, door knockers, with flyers, with, geofencing beyond belief, right? So, in 2004, there was the start of that, but I think it was really 2008 with President Barack Obama's campaign that really codified a voter file that was actionable, and that was very actionable, and also very targeted and updated. I know one of the areas that you guys really lean into is real time, right? So you think about real time data, I believe that the Obama campaign captured it and utilized it the best way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They definitely started the trend there.
Well, you guys also, I think you guys just put out a report fairly recently. I tried to do my homework on political advertising, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So thanks for asking.
Yeah. I mean, wild, a couple stats that were wild to me. One was, I think majority of voters get their information from social media, but then, even more of a majority feel that social media needs to have restrictions on political advertisements. It was kind of interesting. We're going to consume it either way.
Yeah, right.
They're getting it that way, but they don't want to get it that way, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously President Trump's campaign just showed the ability to speak directly, and how I think effective, that was. I mean, Jesse and I come from the Democratic side of politics, but I mean,
the other side uses data too. I'm just not as privy to it, but I would love if there's anybody listening who could come inform us. We would love to hear about it. Or Dave, if you know anyone you could suggest, please send them our way. We would love to talk to them some more too. And of course, I would love to hear maybe sometime offline what you thought of Whiskey Wednesday. But in closing, we would love to get input from listeners about BDEX's new podcast. Also, are there any guests you would like to have us on? Please suggest them in the comments. You can also send us an email to info@bdex.com. We would love for you to share your qualitative data with us. So that's all we had. Thank you so much, Dave. for coming. It was really great chatting with you.
No, it was great. Thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
All right. Take care.